Hello friends. So today I'm going to do some double extractions with my mushrooms. Most of these mushrooms were fresh when we put them into tincture in a high-proof alcohol. I have videos on that. Today we're going to get ready to we're going to drain them and then we're going to do a double extraction. So let me show you what we got going on. Lion's mane. So I grew these lion's mane. These are the dried lion's mane from the yield harvest that I received. This is the tincture of lion's mane. We have chaga mushrooms, which we grew. You can't see that, that's an amber jar. But we have powdered chaga that we're going to use in addition to the double extraction. We have shiitake mushrooms that were fresh, organic when we put these into the tincture. And then I have dried shiitake that were fresh when we put them in the dehydrator. Beach mushrooms, we also were fresh and we have dried. Turkey tail, these were dried when we started this process. And I don't have any dried to do right now, but we will be doing a double extraction with the dried. Polyporous mushroom. Those were not fresh, but we have maitake, and those were fresh, and I dehydrated the fresh. We are also going to be making sure that our alcohol content is where it needs to be by using a Sologite. So we're going to reference Laura Ganora's book, Herbal Constituents, Foundations of Phytochemistry. What we're going to use this for is to determine what percentage of alcohol is actually needed in the final result. So as far as specific mushrooms, very limited in this. I did find one mushroom, which is the reishi mushroom. So we're looking at a lower alcohol content. So when I reference that, what I'm actually stating is that the amount of alcohol that is needed to pull those water-soluble polysaccharides out, those constituents, is a lower percentage. You saw there what the book had shown. When we did the tincture at the beginning, I used a high-proof alcohol. I used a 191 proof alcohol. So since we used a 191 proof alcohol, that means the ethanol to water ratio was 95% ethanol and only 5% water. So only 5% water was able to pull out those water-soluble polysaccharides during this tincture process. Therefore, when we do the double extraction, that's when we're going to get more and all of those water-soluble polysaccharides, the medicinal portion. We've already pulled the non-solubles out with the 95% ethanol that was in the 191 proof vodka. So let's get started. So I'm going to do a voiceover as much easier. My setup is here in the sink. I have an 8-cup measuring cup. We're doing the lion's mane tincture first. I have a strainer that is sitting in my 8-cup measuring cup, and this is a very fine strainer that I use. So I'm going to take the tincture and I'm going to go ahead and pour that in the black fine strainer so that all the 191 proof alcohol can go into the 8-cup measuring cup. So as I'm pouring it through the sleeve strainer, the very fine mesh strainer, the metal strainer gives me some stability while it's straining into the measuring cup. And I'm using the gloved hand to squeeze those mushrooms to get all of that alcohol out of the lion's mane mushroom. I'm repositioning the contents in the mesh strainer so that I can move them around a little bit without touching them, so that I can squeeze as much of the liquid out of the mushrooms. And you can see here somewhat that the mushrooms are there. They're all bound together from squeezing. This is the contents that we had just strained, and this is a pint jar, 2 cups. Our next step is to do the double extraction. We're going to get 4 cups of distilled water, and I'm going to go ahead and measure that out. And the reason we're using 4 cups is because we had 2 cups of our strained tincture that was in the pint jar. I want double that amount of liquid in the distilled water. So we have 4 cups that we're going to add to a pot on the stove. Now once we get that in there, we're going to be taking the contents out of the mesh strainer that we just strained out, our mark, and we're just going to throw that in the water. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to take the dried lion's mane mushrooms that I had dried in a dehydrator, and we're going to add these also. Now we're going to make sure that we stir these up so that they are all wet and combined, and then we're going to turn the stove on so that we can start getting this mixture to a simmer. The purpose of this is, as I had mentioned at the beginning of the video, we only had 5% water in that 191 proof alcohol. And we want to be able to pull out the water-soluble polysaccharides so that we can get the full medicinal properties out of the mushrooms. We've already grabbed the alcohol-soluble, so now we want the water-soluble. And we're just bringing this up to a simmer, and we're going to reduce this down by half. And you want to stir it to make sure that everything is being incorporated correctly, and we're going to reduce it down to 2 cups, the same amount that was in the strained tincture. While that's going on, I'm going to go ahead and do chaga mushroom. Now chaga mushrooms, I did not grow these, and I'm going to go through the same process of straining. The difference between the process that I just did for the lion's mane and what we're going to do with the chaga mushrooms is that I do not have dried chaga mushrooms as I did with those lion's mane. The only chaga mushrooms that I have were in that jar there. There's not going to be an additional, but we're still going to do a double extraction. I'm just not going to have dried mushrooms, chaga mushrooms, to add to this. I'm going to go ahead and squeeze these so I can get as much of that menstruum out. This is the final strain from the chaga mushrooms. I'm going to go through the same process. It's 2 cups. We're going to get 4 cups of distilled water going with the contents that I had just strained of chaga mushroom. And I do apologize. I apparently missed the whole thing of putting the water in the pot with the strained mushrooms. Sorry. So here it is, and I'm just stirring this up, getting it up to a simmer, and we're going to reduce that down to 2 cups. This is the lion's mane. It's at more of a boil than I wanted, so I did turn that down. We're going to start on the maitake mushrooms. This is actually going to be the same process that we did with lion's mane. The reason being is that I have dried mushrooms too. We're going to go ahead and strain it. We're going to go ahead and measure our liquid menstruum. When we're done straining this, we're going to do double the amount of water from what we have in the tincture, and then we're going to go ahead and add our strained mushrooms that are in the jar right here. We're going to add the dried to it also, and then we'll reduce that down by half. And we have 2 cups here also, so we'll be doing 4 cups of distilled water with the dried maitake mushrooms and the mushrooms that we strained from the tincture. Using a mason jar because I'm running out of measuring cups, so we're going to go ahead and use this quart jar. It is 4 cups. We're going to fill this up, and that's what we're going to put in the pot to reduce down with the mushrooms. I've put the 4 cups of distilled water into the pot. I'm going to take the strained maitake mushrooms that we got out of the tincture, put them in the pot, and I'm now going to take the dried maitake mushrooms and add them into the pot also. We're going to do the same process that we're doing with the lion's mane. We're going to reduce this down. We're going to reduce it down to 2 cups. I'm just making sure everything's incorporated, and you can tell the difference in color. If you see the lighter colored mushrooms there, that's actually one of the mushrooms that have been in the tincture for about 4 weeks. The darker ones are the dehydrated maitake mushrooms. The lion's mane mushrooms have reduced by half. We now have only 2 cups, and I'm going to get ready to strain them. We end up with a really beautiful dark liquid. I'll be doing a 3rd decoction, so I'm going to dry those mushrooms, and the maitake mushrooms are ready to be strained. I strained them into this bowl. We've got a beautiful color. It's like a green color for the mushrooms. Now it's time to check on our alcohol percentage for shelf stability. I have the tincture in this beaker, 300 milliliters of the tincture, and I'm going to add our 2nd extraction of water. We have 357 now, and I'm going to pull out the hydrometer to see what our alcohol content is with that much. Hydrometer basically is this beaker that I'm going to use this syringe to get out sample, and we're going to go ahead and put it into that beaker. Found that it was very tedious to do this with the syringe going over and over, so I ended up getting some of the liquid in there. It was just going to take forever. I ended up pouring the menstruum in directly into the beaker, and I put the hydrometer gauge in, and we're good to go. Now, of course, this is not at 191 proof anymore because we did a double extraction, but we are at 90 proof alcohol, shelf stable. I was very pleased with this, so I know my percentages and I can mix accordingly. I had to do another extraction though. See the film on the top? And here we are. It's absolutely beautiful. It's ready to be bottled. A labor of love, friends. Stay healthy.